Welcome back to Caracast, the podcast from Carasoft, the trusted government IT solutions provider. Subscribe to get the latest technology updates in the public sector. I'm Anthony Jimenez, your host from the Carasoft production team. On behalf of Carasoft, we would like to welcome you to today's podcast, focused around the initial phases of 5G initiatives. Juan Ramirez, Director of 5G Cross-Functional Team, Office of the DoD CIO, Scott Vogelsang, CTO of Nokia Federal Solutions, Nokia, David Simpson, Rear Admiral and USN Professor at Virginia Tech Pamplin College of Business Leadership and Cybersecurity Programs, Mark Demers, Director of 5G Solutions, Carasoft, and Scott Raban, Consulting CTO, Carasoft. We'll discuss insights into progress updates, success stories, lessons learned, future strategies, and related subjects around the power of 5G.
Good afternoon, everyone. Carasoft Technologies would like to welcome you to our first webinar in our Carasoft 5G series titled Navigating the 5G Landscape, Progress and Status in U.S. Federal Deployments. Now to tell you a little bit about Carasoft. We are a trusted government IT solutions provider delivering software and support solutions to federal, state, local, and education customers. Carasoft maintains dedicated teams to support sales and marketing for all of its vendors. Our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, so please do not hesitate to call or email us with any of your needs. At this time, we'd like to introduce the speakers for today. I'm going to hand it off to Mark Demers, our Director of 5G Solutions at Carasoft.
Thank you, Sonia. So good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be. Like Sonia said, my name is Mark Demers. I'm the Director of Carasoft's 5G technology vertical. At Carasoft, we're committed to driving the adoption of 5G technology within the federal government and other public sector institutions. We support every 5G capability area and use case. We partner with many great companies that specialize in 5G infrastructure, networking technologies, 5G security, and service delivery. We have many great subject matter experts that can identify the right technology for every environment, and we connect organizations with solutions that help them meet evolving challenges. We also provide educational material, host events, much like today's, offer technical demos, and have other resources to help organizations gather information and make informed decisions. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here and we're happy to help. I appreciate everyone for taking the time out of their day to tune in, and I'd like to get started by introducing our participants. So firstly, we have the Director of the 5G Cross-Functional Team, Office of the Department of Defense CIO, Juan Ramirez. We have the CTO of Nokia Federal Solutions, Steve Vogelsang, Retired Admiral and Professor at Virginia Tech, Dave Sampson, and last but not least, our moderator for today and Consulting CTO at Carasoft Technology, Scott Raban. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Scott and our panel of experts, and let's get the event started.
Mark, thanks for that. And Juan, Dave, Steve, it's a pleasure to have each of you here today. Before the call, we determined that Juan has the best weather. So we're going to start out by putting him in the hot seat, no pun intended. First of all, with your role in driving 5G and DoD, Juan, it's just an honor to have you here. Can you give us an overview of your role and the charter for the DoD 5G cross-functional team?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks first and foremost to Carasoft for having me here. Aloha. I'm actually here in Hawaii right now, so just keeping up with the 5G mission here. But as Scott, you introduced, my name is Juan Ramirez. I'm the Director for the 5G cross-functional team here under DoD CIO. For those of you who don't know the cross-functional team, it is a SecDef-empowered organization that is meant to accomplish a specific mission. So in our case, 5G. You might wonder, what does that actually entail? So we're responsible for the acceleration and adoption of 5G within the department. Over the last 3 years, back in 2020, when 5G kind of got its run within the department, there was a pure focus on research and development. So under the guise of OESD R&E, Honorable SHU, R&E went forward with multiple tranche sites to look at getting 5G started within the department, focusing on very specific activities, ranging from AR/VR to Flight Line of the Future, contested logistics, smart warehouses, a bunch of different projects. And in 2024, when CIO took over and the reign went over from Honorable SHU to Honorable Sherman, we are now looking and focused on implementation. So taking those 5G projects and actually implementing them and working with the services to not only adopt it, but continue to sustain it in the future. So at a very top level, that's kind of what the 5G cross-functional charter is. The team itself is comprised of SMEs from different organizations. We have representation from ANS, from R&E, as well as CIO, and most importantly, the MLDEPs. And the reason why I say most importantly the MLDEPs is because they're the actual ones who are going to adopt and accelerate this technology as we move forward. The cool thing about having this connection and organization of SMEs is that we're actually able to take technology, look at it from a research and development perspective, and actually carry it all the way through to an acquisition and sustainment piece. So actually walking it from ground all the way up to the top. And so it's really exciting to actually be part of that organization. Now, overall, for the 5G vision within the department, and you're probably wondering, like, how are we actually going to do this and accomplish this mission? Under Honorable Sherman, his view and kind of what we're adopting now for the vision for 5G is looking at the technology that exists today and actually implementing it through three lines of efforts. The first one focused on actually building that 5G infrastructure on the military bases, focusing on building that architecture around the cantonment area. And for those of you who don't know what the cantonment area is, it's really focused on the barracks, the training centers, focusing on morale and welfare, really getting that 5G infrastructure for our military members who are on base, trying to just do that basic, the training or actually calling back and just being and connecting with their families. So ensuring that we have that foundation there. Really partnering with the MNOs to ensure that they can get on base. One of the things that we were seeing was that for somebody like either Nokia or any one of our other MNOs to get on base, it could take anywhere from 24 to 36 months. And by the time you get there, it's either the system itself wasn't set up so that you could get infrastructure built on it fast. So what we're trying to do within the CFT is streamline that process and ensure that the MNOs and the vendors can get on base and actually build that infrastructure quicker, faster. Because again, as we know, technology will change by tomorrow. So we need to get that infrastructure built out. As we move into line of effort 2, it really takes that technology and that infrastructure and building it out from just the barracks area to upwards of 100% of the base. And again, right now our focus is on military installations, not just CONUS, but OCONUS. So really, when we're talking about building that infrastructure and carrying it out to the entire base, that's where you really start to see these bespoke activities come through, where we're really able to push forward either, Flightline of the Future or AR, VR, telemedicine, or actually looking at establishing private networks potentially to help build those specific networks for the services or for the military installation. And then as we get into the third line of effort, which is where I really get excited about it, is actually taking this 5G technology and taking it out to the tactical edge, actually getting that technology into the hands of the warfighter. So at a very top level, those are our 3 lines of effort that how we're going to deploy and accelerate 5G adoption. While there are 3 lines of effort, they're not structured in a way where we're trying to do one first over the other. They're all synonymous. So it's one huge thing that we try to push forward within the department. And it really is to the benefit that we're seeing within the department by partnering with industry and being able to deploy this technology faster and get it out to the hands of the warfighter. So very top level. As you kind of said, it's a big mission. I'm excited about it. I talk fast. I get excited about everything that we do here. And it's just really been an honor just to be here, be part of this. And thank you again to Carahsoft for taking the time to listen to me talk and ramble.
No, well, we're going to start pulling in other folks into the conversation too. I do want to stick with you just for a quick follow-up. Before I do that, I neglected to mention to all our participants and attendees today, feel free to enter questions in the question box. I know I didn't need to invite you to do that, and some of you are already contributing. Thank you so much so far. We'll work on those as we go through the conversation. But Juan, back to you. So with that mission and those 3 legs of the stool, so to speak, what's your characterization of 5G adoption efforts to date? You've got over 3 years of projects, early experiments, and so forth. How would you assess where we are today? And I will ask Steve and Dave to follow up on that, but you'll get the first cut at that.
That's a great question. So I think if you were to ask for my honest opinion, we're in a position now where we're actually able to take the technology that we focused on for the last 3 years for research and development and push it forward. So first and foremost, I'm excited to see that technology, those use cases that we developed over the last 3 years have matured in a sense where we're actually able to accomplish what those set requirements were back then. What I think needs to happen moving forward is we need to be able to deploy that technology faster. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where we're still in a continuing resolution. So a lot of it is constrained with dollars. So, I would encourage everybody really get your congressman to push forward and, get those appropriation bills signed faster, because CRs tend to prohibit us from going forward and actually doing new work. For all of the stuff that we have done before over the last 3 years, the good thing about it, it's not considered new work. So we're actually able to continue funding it, albeit monthly increments. We've got to love the CR, but we are able to push that. Now where we run into issue though is the new technology, the new developments, the new research and development that is required, because as we all know, ideally we're looking for 5G COT solutions where we can just take it, immediately get it out to the warfighter and actually use that technology. But sometimes we have to, as I say, zhuzh it up and do our own research and development to make it and put that extra government sauce on it. But when you run into situations like this where we're in a CR, we can't. And so I think looking back at where we're at today, we can do things faster, better, but sometimes we're prohibited. The second piece about it, though, is we're really working with the services now, kind of going back to the whole concept of the CFT. We have military representation from all of the MILDEPs. And the good thing about it is those folks are meant to be representative of those services and actually get us what those gaps and those requirements are. And so we're actually able to connect the dots between what the services need and what industry has and actually put them together. But without money, you can only do but so much. So I would say we're in a position where we can succeed. We're seeing technology being pushed out. We have policy and standards in place that enable us to get it out there. Now it's just a matter of actually getting funding, establishing that true 5G baseline within the department, capturing all those requirements and those needs from the services, which they do exist. And we're actually getting better at articulating what our needs are and then working with industry to get that 5G technology out to the warfighter. So to your point, where are we today? We're making strides. Can we do better? Yes.
For sure. Well, so you tee up the follow-up very well. The technology suppliers play a really important part in the ecosystem, especially if you really want to adopt, COTS products and technologies, with minimal modification. Steve,
Exactly.
You come from that technology supplier and innovation perspective. What follow-up would you have on this, whether it's status of projects or how you're working to provide Juan with the tools that he needs?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll start with the mission from Nokia as it relates to bringing 5G into DoD. I mean, the way that we think of it, and you kind of hit on it, Scott, it's COTS technology, right? We've invested billions over the years developing these systems, developing the technology. It's got a capability set that is really amazing compared to a lot of the tactical comms that are out there. And so we're starting to see really good progress, I have to say. I mean, if you go back, as you mentioned, we were doing experiments 3 years ago. We'll talk more about one of the experiments that Nokia was involved in later, I think, dynamic spectrum sharing. But we're now starting to see deployments on base, and it's for various use cases. Training is one. Starting to see flight line of the future getting deployed in places. It's not something where I would say it's rolling out in mass just yet. I think we're learning how to do this, how to do it securely, how to do it efficiently. And I think we've gotten over a hump in regards to the role of 3GPP and 5G technology in a tactical environment for use by the warfighters. That was something that if you go back 2 years, a lot of people were scratching their head. How do we do that in a secure way? I think there's been really good progress with some smaller companies, by the way, that kind of dug in and figured that out by taking the COTS equipment, figuring out how can I deploy this in a tactical environment in a way that's going to be safe, that's going to bring a real capability enhancement to the warfighter. The company that we work with called Phoenix Group, we actually decided to lean in and acquire that company back in December. And so we're pretty excited about those capabilities and lining up with Juan's mission to get those capabilities into the hands of the warfighters.
I mean,
Super.
the thing I want to, Scott, if you don't mind, I just want to, give kudos, especially not only to Steve and Nokia, but just industry writ large, where we're actually seeing, I think in the past, you didn't have that talk, that dialogue. And I think a lot of it, communication goes a long way. But what we're seeing now is industry is taking an active role to not only reach out to like myself and my team, but connecting what those dots are and actually being able to bring technology that meets the warfighter's needs and actually help us deploy it faster. So it's a great partnership that continues, and so I think Steve and I talk on a weekly basis, but it's one of those things where it's great to see that discussion, and also that discussion happen within the MILDEPs too, because I think in the past there was a need sometimes where I'm just Department of Navy or I'm just Department of Army and I just need to focus on myself. the good thing about being here, we're actually able to take that technology, as Steve was alluding to, and actually say, is there an enterprise need to it? Is there an enterprise flair to it that we can actually scale? And that's something that, if we don't talk, we don't know what's out there, then it's kind of hard to talk, to bring that to the forefront. So I want to give Steve and his team kudos for everything they've done, especially with working with us.
For sure. My career brought me to Washington a long time ago. I won't say how long ago, but I've had the privilege of being in the middle of how do we adapt off the shelf technologies for military use. So it's amazing to see how the wheels turn, sometimes not as quickly as we like, but let me bring the topic back to Dave. Now, Dave, you have a little different perspective from Juan and Steve on this. What are your assessments and responses on this so far?
Yeah, so I don't think it's in opposition to what they described. I think it's complementary to what they've described. I just would like to bring it up a notch, and the National Spectrum Strategy has made clear this is an area of international competition that has great significance for the United States. So while there's a compelling need for all the reasons that Juan and Steve represented, for the great things that we can do for service members, for their families, for mission, to think of this as an important component to JADC2 at the tactical edge. There's an imperative that we become good at this as a nation, that we develop some national champions within this space, and that we execute it in a way that allows us to compete around the rest of the world with US technologies that are well regarded and competitive around the rest of the world. And so I think it's important for the MILDEPs to really recognize the important role that the nation has bestowed upon them in saying, in years past, in decades past, DoD was a lag entity when it came to use of commercial wireless. We literally tried to keep it out of many of our areas on bases, much beyond the cantonment area, as Juan described. It was no wireless here. This is a culture shift. The nation is asking of DoD to say, no, look, we need you to figure out how to utilize this spectrum resource in ways that help our companies become really good at it, so that we can recover leadership in this area around the rest of the world. And a key piece of that is the introduction of ORAN, or open source radio access network technologies. And that's an essential part going forward. We've got areas on some bases where they haven't fully utilized 4G LTE. Sure. There's all sorts of upside to do great innovation in not only person to person, but machine to machine in that very capable technology. We really need to do, in addition to bringing in 5G and 5G ORAN onto our installations and out to the edge, is focus on what's the demand side of that? What does better, faster, cheaper mean for a given mission area, for logistics, or for a tactical area to put bombs on target more efficiently, more surgically than we would before. These are the kinds of things that are just inherent in the ability of the new functions in 5G, the low latency, the high reliability, the edge cloud, the ability to have multiple sensors make sense, and act at the edge. I would just charge us all doing more and moving faster on the demand side of why we're going to want to have 5G ORAN deployed as rapidly as possible.
For sure. Well, so you've said some things there that really match up with one of the first questions that's come in here. We have a Percy Alexander who asks, Mr. Ramirez, I've been part of the Navy's 5G prototype, which is linked to improving their warehouse operations. Where is the Army in this effort? And I'll just offer a couple qualifications. We don't have anyone directly representing Army here, so Juan, I'm gonna need you to speak to that. And Dave, with your Navy background, Dave, you may have some good compare contrast. But Juan, can you speak to that first?
Yeah, definitely. And kind of what I was alluding to earlier when we were talking about the last 3 years of all the different efforts that we focused on. Um, the whole idea behind doing research and development was to get those kinks out, to really focus on what those technologies were and how we were able to deploy it. So, to Percy's question, yes, we were successful in the two smart warehouse opportunities that we had with Navy, one with Marine Corps and one with Navy. And what we've done is we've taken those lessons learned and now we are incorporating it into how can we deploy those technologies within the larger framework of DoD. So your specific question, what is Army specifically doing? We are actually working with them to see what can we do and how can we tailor those requirements, and not necessarily tailor, it's the wrong word that I wanted to use. Those specific use cases that were done at Navy and for the Marine Corps with very specific requirements. Now what we're trying to do is I like to say, take that platinum package that you may have for your cable bill and actually bring it down and figure out what's that base model that you need, what's that general cable that you need, and how can we deploy that within the department. So now we're taking a look at those smart warehousing efforts, how can we wrap it into contested logistics, and how can we deploy that throughout the department? So that is something that we're working right now. Again, going back to what I was talking to earlier, we have funding for those requirements for those use cases that we were able to do research and development for, but now it's trying to fill that gap and see what those needs are within the greater department and actually push it out. And also to Percy's second question, because this kind of like wraps into one of our other tranche side efforts, the flyaway kits that were done at Nellis Air Force Base, those are actually operational. We're actually able to deploy those. So if that is something that you or your office is interested in, please feel free to reach out to my office and we can connect you with the right folks and how to get those technologies. But that's one of the good things about all of these tranche side efforts that are now going from pure research and development to operational, where we're actually able to say, hey, we have this requirement here. Let's push it out not only to maybe Navy, let's push it out to Army, let's push it out to the enterprise. So that's one of the benefits that we have within my organization and where we're able to push it out because we have a team that's focused specifically on service engagement activities. So again, we're able to, push those technologies and kind of give what I like to say, those little baseball cards that actually say, hey, this is what we focused on. This is what we did. This is a cool technology that we can employ. This is how you can use it. Now let's get it out to you. So great question, Percy. I will make sure that we get you my contact information and we can connect the dots.
Very cool. Dave, for the Navy perspective, not sure what your role was in your service time with the earlier Navy experiments, but tell us what you think.
Yeah, well, let me start with hua to my Army signal friends who I had numerous Army appreciation tours, including working for General Austin and General Odierno in Iraq as the J6, where just such respect for Army as it deploys to run communications at scale. There's none of the MILDEPs that can scale up to run communications for a country and then bring alive the ICT economy within those countries. So Army has a very important role to play here. Quite often the Army takes a little longer to do their deliberate planning, but once they do it, they execute, par excellence, and I have no doubt that they'll continue to do the same. I also harken back to my time with Lieutenant General Lawrence and Mike Krieger, her deputy, who just passed away the other day. So sad. But we pulled together all of Army's networks, which were over 1,200 Active Directory environments, into a single Army enterprise approach. So all that previous work by the Army is going to pay dividends as the Army moves out and makes 5G a core activity on installations, but also in the deployed environment. I would point to an example of a project now that Army's created what they call a PL, a product line for base emergency communications. All of the MILDEPs are figuring out, how do I do next generation 911, emergency alerting, first responder communications in a coherent way? It would be a shame to do that not in the context of 5G. And I think that's a near-term opportunity for Army to align their base emergency communications efforts with their need, their desire to upgrade every installation to a 5G standard. On the Navy side, Navy's always been the plucky department that could, and don't let anybody tell us no, because we'll just take that as a personal challenge. And in true form, the Navy and the Marine Corps have done some very great work in early prototypes in this regard. And I'll just call out one of them, which is a tremendous success out at Whidbey Island, where the whole group has installed for the first time a pure US technology stack for open radio access network for the base flight line. And they literally have in that one prototype achieved important milestones for each of Juan's three LOEs. The first, the cantonment area, one of the partners, Boingo, does AFIS, MWR, wireless support, 5G support on over 80 installations around the world. Boingo also, by the way, does the entire New York Port Authority. So that's all 4 airports in New York, all of the seaports, all of the transshipment locations, the office structures all the way up to 30 Rock. And there's a 5G umbrella around that they provide. So that experience and that focus on, at the end of the day, there needs to be a customer relationship with how we provide these services, was really good to push the envelope on that and to bring a strong player there. They also brought in JMA and Hughes, now Hughes EchoStar, to focus on the tactical side of that. I'm sorry, the mission side first, bring it out to the flight line and ensuring that capabilities to improve maintenance, but also the capabilities to automate so many functions in and around the flight line are an included part of that project. And while they haven't done it yet, I can just imagine. I spent much of my career around Navy flight lines, including 2 years on the John F. Kennedy.
Sure.
Yellow gear is an important, and it takes people to drive the yellow gear. Well, we have the ability now through that project at Whidbey Island, right, to have the low latency control loop so that there's a tactile ability to get actual better driver visibility for the yellow gear, but to do so remotely. And there's so much potential to improve our ability to service the operational aircraft and more rapidly bring deeper level repairs out to the edge there. The final piece and the last LOE that Juan described was the satellite piece, and Hughes brought in from the very beginning an ability to be 5G native up to what we call non-terrestrial networks or to space, and that worked so well that the Hughes team was then asked to, hey, can you come out to Hawaii and help us do a transportable one of those? That would be a lead effort for what it might look like to provide that 5G bubble for a tactical unit forward. And that project is also going extremely well. Navy's very pleased with that. And I'm sure that, all 3 of those prototype examples will pay great dividends, not just for the Navy and Marine Corps, but for all the services as they can draw from those strong players.
But I also think, to David's point, though, one of the things that you do see once you build out that infrastructure and you start developing one use case to address, Project X, having that infrastructure enables you, to David's point, to start doing, oh, I can do Y, I can do Z, and I can start building these use cases. That was one of the things that, discussions with other vendors that we have is, okay, now that we've done this, what's the next step? You don't want to lose that opportunity to do other improvements. So, at Whidbey, I'm here now and I'm hearing all these great things and actually seeing what we can do. And now it's just a matter of how do you do more and what are the new use cases that are going to develop from this. So it's great. And to David's point, like, you're able to take that technology and expand it. And so I think kind of to Bill's question with NTN, we are starting to see these the specific use cases that we focused on throughout the department. There is a need for non-traditional network use cases to be developed, and that is something that we are looking to do in partnering with like Hughes or with other vendors just to focus on those things. So it is one of those things that the department is looking into. It is a priority, especially when we get into the 3GPP discussions and the next iterations of that, what's coming out. That is what our focus is on as we move forward.
It really is fascinating and encouraging to see what's happening with non-terrestrial networks and real, like the example Bill cited here, 17 megabit proven speeds. I want to steer this back to Steve in terms of, use cases. We all need use cases to figure out how solutions get built and delivered. And, Steve, you're right in the middle of commercial use cases versus what you're seeing for different US federal use cases. How is that going? How do you compare the tactical scenarios, and you go and you purchase a company like Phoenix versus learning from, warehouse scenarios where there could and should be a lot of learning with commercial customers? How do you process that as Nokia?
Yeah, it's a good point. So, at the end of the day, when we talk about deploying on a military base, it's a private wireless network. And, it's 5G today. We've got a ton of experience deploying private wireless, typically with 4G, although those are now starting to transition over to 5G, in various, industrial segments, whether that's mines, whether that's warehouses, whether that's power utilities. And all of that experience plays directly to addressing the use cases that the DoD has. So, we can take what we've learned, we can apply that, wrap it with 5G, integrate it in things like O-RAN, which is a critical piece of this, and then deliver that to the DoD to address, in some cases, they're very similar use cases. Juan had mentioned some of them, telepresence. You can think about equipment maintenance. These bases are very large. What happens when something breaks down and it's not near a building where I might have Wi-Fi coverage? We can easily blanket that base with 5G, get you good connectivity. Flight line's another great example. There's no way to get good coverage on the flight line with any other technology. 5G is the only technology that allows us to do that. And so we've been working on this for a long time, which I think what Juan kind of mentioned is, how do we do this fast now? How do we make it easy? And that's what we've really been focused on, is how do we take these huge systems that we originally built for the big MNOs that have, tons of engineers that know how to deploy and operate, and package that so we can go into a base, work with a base commander, turn up a network very quickly, make it easy to run, and focus on the use cases rather than on any complexity to get that network running.
Very good. Well, let's stay with you for just a second on this. We've gotten already a couple questions on what's happening after 5G. What about 6G? And what about 7G? And as we were pulling this series together, I kind of had an initial bias that, there's so much to talk about with 5G. Let's put our effort here. But you know what? It's just becoming clear that we already need to start feeding what we learn commercially and militarily into what's going to happen in the next generation of wireless specs. Again, Steve, you are the home of Nokia Bell Labs. You have some incredible thinkers that have been on the leading edge of these technologies for decades. What's your view on what's happening in 6G and beyond? What are some of the important things for you? And we will go to Dave and Juan on this as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of activity and work going on in Bell Labs, thinking about what's next and future G, 6G. I mean, to me, it's a continuum. We get to 6G, we'll be talking about 7G. We want to continue to enhance the technology, but a few of the areas that I would sort of tap into that I'm personally excited about. One is utilizing AI technology to improve performance on the air interface. Mobile World Congress last week, we had a really cool demo where the Bell Labs researchers are not only looking at, okay, how do we apply an AI learning model to the air interface to improve spectral utilization, but looking into what are the security concerns of that? Do I have to share that model? If that model is data that I don't want to share, is there a way to get that capability without sharing the model? So they're figuring out ways that you can build these models, you don't have to expose them, still get the gain that you want. So a lot of that work that needs to be done to go from, hey, this is a cool concept of AI and 6G to this is how we can deploy it and scale it and do it securely. So working through all those issues. If I tap on a couple of other areas that get me excited, I mean, one is opening new spectrum bands. So looking at FR3, that's, in the general, north of FR1, so above 6 gigahertz up to about 24 gigahertz. A lot of opportunity to open those bands. Now that will come with challenges. So we'll end up talking about dynamic spectrum sharing again. So how do we tap into new spectrum that probably has incumbent uses? And this will build on some of the work that we've been doing with Dr. Rondeau's team over at OUSD and R&E, Future G group, that started with the dynamic spectrum sharing work we did at Hill Air Force Base, but we're going to continue that work with OUSD. We need to keep going because that's a challenge that I think we've got to get better and better at over time. Then without taking too much time, I'll tap on one other thing, and this is not comprehensive 6G, but the other thing I'll mention is one of the big areas for 6G we're looking at is integrated sensing, so that you turn the network into a sensor. There's a bunch of use cases for this. We can look at private wireless use cases where you can think of, inside of a warehouse where I have autonomous robots moving around. If I can track where they are, I can avoid, the robot accidentally running into a human that didn't know it was there. Just safety things, all sorts of stuff like that. But I'd say if I think big picture, longer term, back to spectrum sharing, I think I was at a conference and it was Dr. Ben Pimentel that kind of said, hey, if we're going to eventually have to reallocate spectrum that the DoD is using today, and let's say the DoD is using it for sensing, we want to make sure that we can continue to use it for sensing. And so I think, a 6G system that's got integrated sensing that can securely deliver the data to the previous use. And I don't know how you sort that out, but it really kind of struck me when I heard him say that that can be very interesting. So I'm excited about that area as well.
Well, it's, spectrum as an issue keeps coming up. It's so unique to radio communications. I know that seems like probably a very obvious thing to say, but it doesn't have an analog in many other communications technologies. Dave, I'll pose the question to you: evolution of wireless 6G and beyond. I know you've got some definite things that you've been focusing on for spectrum sharing and so forth.
Yeah. So first of all, 6G is 6 years away, right? So let's not continue to evolve and implement in 5G. We've got several releases still to go. If you've got a good engineering idea, don't just keep it till 6G, right? Work it now in the various releases, and they are, right? And that's what Steve really described, right? This is a continuum, and we like to think of the huge change between one and the other. It all builds upon itself. The second piece, though, is the U.S. was not as involved as it should have been in 5G standards buildup for a variety of reasons. We did not have the commensurate seat at the table to address U.S. specific interests. Qualcomm, of course, had a significant role, but there were a number of areas where other countries were just more organized and achieved more of a leadership position in 5G. So we don't want to repeat that mistake. And thankfully, the nation from the administration on down has recognized that and taken steps to make sure that that's not the case. A couple of things that then fall into that category. What's big and different, right? Without driving right down to an engineering solution, because if you have an engineering solution, you should be working at one of the releases for 5G. The first piece, I would echo Steve's point about integrated sensing, but take it one step further, which is it's not just the integrated sensing, it's the sense, make sense, and act, right? Integrated AI. Sure. And how do we ensure that we fully thought through, pull from those different sensors? How is that stored at the edge? How do we secure the algorithms? How do we segregate the large language models that may be very purpose-built for one organization, may be proprietary in some cases, but may also want to share public information in another way. We've got work to do to figure out how to make that native and make it secure to the point where the public can be confident in that utilization. Another part, I just love working with Steve because he is such a bright thought leader in this space. The integrated sensing concept of every aperture a sensor. When you turn every aperture into a sensor, you then have the ability to share the noise at each of the apertures and begin to figure out, well, what's signal and what's noise in a way that helps you lower or improve SNR throughout your entire network in some really useful ways. And that includes not only inadvertent harmful interference, but intentional harmful interference. And so 6G, I hope will have that ability to be agile in its response to harmful interference as an included part of the process. Last area that I'd like to touch upon is 6G should be sharing native. And there's a group right now that I'm a part of that is working on describing what that would be. And my position is that if we just pulled together all the people within the 5G community and say, let's figure out how to share better, we'll have missed the boat. The sharing opportunity we should be shooting for in 6G should be all the spectrum dependent systems that aren't in the 5G community. We should be going to all of our radar operators, all of our SIGINT systems, all of our systems today that have dedicated spectrum that they can't perceive of a future where they wouldn't have their protected band. It's those communities that we need to plan sharing native 6G so that there's the right comfort level, the right degree of prioritization of the mission need for these spectrum dependent systems to currently have their carved out spectrum to the point where they see sharing in a 6G sharing native approach as an asset, not something that they got to do, but something that improves their agility, improves their options as they come under attack. So those are the couple of 6G things for me that come to mind.
So Juan, how do those items align with your priorities for what you need in innovation, whether it's in 5G today or 6G and beyond? And if you could, I know that you can, work in the importance of—
You're giving me a lot of credit.
Well, no, I just, no worries at all. We talk very loosely about O-RAN because it's all part of our vocabulary. A lot of our participants may not fully appreciate the innovation and the national security implications for a robust O-RAN system. I'd love to hear you talk about that as well. We're running up at quarter of, so this might be the last formal section of the webinar, but I'll give you the opportunity to address those areas, Juan.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, kind of just looking at the 6G and 7G question piece of it. The great thing is Steve and David already laid the foundation for me, so this is easy, I think, for this part. Going back to the whole construct of the CFT, we partner with ARNI, so it's not just CIO is just doing this, or just ANS is doing this, or just ARNI is doing this. We're actually partnering together. So as you see that natural progression from 5G into the next G or into future G, we're working in tandem to ensure that the technologies that we're investing in today set the foundation for what we're going to do as we move forward. So as Steve and David were talking about integrated sensing and communication, that is a priority for the future G office. That, as well as ubiquitous and instant access, in addition to looking at the tactical piece, that I kind of talked about. So it's great to see that as we look at our three lines of effort, that natural progression into the next set of future G efforts are there. So, one of the questions earlier was like, are we going to start investing in non-terrestrial network use cases? Again, that is going to address the ubiquitous and instant access need that we have. So future G is already starting to look at that, as well as like new sensors and data devices that will improve environmental processing. So those are things that we're starting to invest in today, starting to do that research and development for it, so it'll just naturally progress into it. So that from that piece, it's good to know that the department's going the same route as industry, which is also going back to that discussion of we're all talking to one another. So as industry is starting to see the natural progression to invest in apples, that's where the department's going to invest, as opposed to we're going to go and look at oranges, right? So it's just great to see that discussion and that natural progression. To David's point, though, when he talked about 3GPP and the standards and ensuring that we actually bring up that that need to actually strengthen our posture, what we've done is like these use cases, any gaps that we find, we're actually bringing that in, partnering with industry, since they're the ones who are really the voice with 3GPP to push forward those changes or those modifications to the standards. So that is something that you're starting to see that partnership continue to develop. We're also taking a look at the technology that is, that we need to focus on, whether it's in integrated sensing and communications, focusing on dynamic spectrum sharing, trying to figure out where do we put our best, where do we put our best effort, and then just partnering with industry, say this is where the government wants to go, this is where the government sees a natural progression. So working with them to ensure that they are our voice as we go forward within 3GPP and the standards. To that part about spectrum sharing, we are also laying the foundation for that. So while we did have the dynamic spectrum sharing tranche site at Hill Air Force Base, we've now moved that equipment to Playas, New Mexico, and we're actually setting up a what I would classify as a test environment to look at future cases for dynamic spectrum sharing. So again, laying that foundation down to set us up for success as we move forward. So totally excited about that, to see the department investing in our future, and not just kind of taking what we did at one use case and one tranche site, saying to put a bow on it to say that was done and just kind of putting it on the back shelf. We're actually doing something going forward. Now with Open RAN, that's the fun part. That is one of the things I didn't touch about when we were looking at the different lines of effort. But as we move forward, there is a need for us to have an open architecture where we can have that plug and play concept, where we're able to have vendors come in and it's not just tied to one specific vendor to provide us an RU or DU or CU. In the long run, it's going to make it cheaper and better for the government, but not only for the government, but writ large, the overall ecosystem itself. It's intended to provide an avenue for more innovation, especially as we start to develop and further look at the RIC, or the radio access. I can't even talk. The RIC itself.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was like, I'm so excited about this. I'm like, But as we look at the non-real time and the real-time RIC and looking to see what those X apps and R apps are able to do, we're actually able to develop and address those AI ML requirements that will enable better use cases. So, but with that comes the complexity of a potential issue with regards to security. So ensuring that the department is actually laying the foundation down for what our secure requirements are, and then baking that into not only the standards that we see that Open RAN Alliance is doing, but also ensuring that we bake it into the overall security standards that 3GPP is pushing. So a lot of great activity. Steve kind of touched on this when we were in Mobile World Congress last week. Everybody's bought into this concept of Open RAN, which is great, and you're able to see this industry move and backing behind it. So now it's how do we push it out faster? I'm excited to say within the department, Honorable Sherman is all in on it too. He is taking the call not only from the White House and from NSC, but from Congress to say, okay, now that we have this concept, let's deploy it. And as we look at doing private networks, this is an architecture that we're looking to build into the overall ecosystem itself. So we were successful in having a greenfield operation over at Whidbey, and now we're looking to develop another Open RAN prototype at Fort Bliss that's going to be focused on a spectrum coexistence and another use case for the Army. So really excited to see. Now, the only thing that I would stress is the department shouldn't be the only one leading the adoption of Open RAN. It should be something that should be escalated and elevated to the commercial side as well, and just taking lessons learned to see what we are able to deploy outside of the United States, and seeing how that push from industry is already adopting. I spoke with Vodafone, and they're actually about to deploy 170,000 Open RAN instances. And I'm like, that's fantastic. How can we do that within the United States? And so ensuring that we partner with all of our MNOs to, lay what that foundation looks like and then just go forward.
So many things that we touched on here. As we start to wind this down, we'll go around the horn and give everybody one last comment. I just want to insert here, Open RAN spectrum sharing, fixed wireless access, and so many other topics here are going to be part of future webinars that Carahsoft is doing on the whole 5G ecosystem and how it's impacting and being used by different US government entities. So we can only touch the tops of the waves here on so many things, but please continue to join us as we continue this series with other folks like the ones we have here today. Let's wind this down with what's one thing you wanted to say today that we didn't touch on, and we'll go Juan, Dave, and end with Steve.
One thing that I didn't get to say, well, I don't kind of address Blanche's question. As we're looking at the rollout and the adoption of 5G, it's a partnership. It's not one is deciding everything. And so we are working with the military departments. They have a prioritized list of installations that not only are we going to focus on building that 5G infrastructure to address the cantonment area, but also which locations require either the use of a private network or just building out what that communication infrastructure looks like. And so it's not being done in a box. It's actually what we're trying to do within the department now is, with waning budgets, make smart decisions. And it's not only going to be up to the department to make those decisions, but partnering with industry partners like Steve, like Nokia, and taking what can you do? How can we do it smarter? How can we deploy it? And in some cases, 5G right now, everybody's like, oh, I love 5G, I love 5G. But when you ask them, well, why do you need 5G? They don't really know. And so right now, what we're trying to do is figure out, where do we make those smart investments, helping them to structure and actually determine what they really need that, build out for, and then building a solution that addresses not only that need, but the potential for future improvements that are not going to require complete rip and replace. So it's a partnership. And it's one of those things that I did kind of touch on it, but that is something that we're continuing to do. It's not being done in a vacuum. It's actually all of us getting together so that if we all succeed. And that's one of the things that I'm excited to, that the CFT is fostering, but not only within the services themselves, but holistically with industry too. So just want to say that's kind of my last words, and thank you to the industry partners for, being great partners with us.
Dave, to you, what go beyond partnership or take it whatever direction you want.
I'll build from partnership, because this isn't just a DoD tasking, right? It's a whole of government approach, and the significant funding that early on was given to DoD to kind of jumpstart innovation in 5G has now shifted over to Department of Commerce, NTIA, under the CHIPS Act, and the Public Wireless Supply Chain Innovation Fund has a significant amounts of money to begin to build that infrastructure as code around O-RAN in a way that allows us to have the competitive choices at each of the CU, DU, RU, RIC levels, but to stitch those together in a secure manner. That cybersecurity challenge is not trivial, and Virginia Tech, on behalf of NTIA, is doing significant work in that area, both in standing up one of the nation's OTICs, or the test and interoperability centers, with, in our case, Verizon, AT&T, to address sustainment of the ability to check code and to make sure code continues to identify vulnerabilities and rapidly address and mitigate, but also in several R&D projects on top of that to develop cybersecurity initiatives. First one for us is developing a threat model for O-RAN that will then allow a to-be process for that identification of a new vulnerability, a new threat, rapid assessment among a community. Remember, open source software is open source. There's not an immediate owner of, well, whose job is it to address the vulnerability. So we're working to start with the attack framework, the fight framework for 5G, and bring that all the way down to the efforts of Working Group 11 and SA3 in 3GPP. And let me just close on a piece of the challenge that NTIA absolutely gets. We've had the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, the NICE framework, identified 54 discrete work roles for cybersecurity that really help us identify the workforce needs and jumpstart. the people side, the human capital part of cyber. We need a national initiative for spectrum education, and Virginia Tech is working with partners to include GSMA to begin to identify what are the work roles, not only for network operators of ORAN, but how do you work that all the way out to the edge so that if you're a factory owner and you're scratching your head, just saying, I think I want some of that automation stuff. What's the organic piece that you want an employee to be certified in? And then what do they contract for in the way of human capital to be assured of bringing wireless in where you never used it before to
Sure.
bring some of that cool AI and automation robotics at the edge. Those are my thoughts, Scott.
Perfect. More to unpack, but Steve, you bring us home before we hand it back to Sonia.
Okay, well, maybe I'll bring us back to 5G and what we can do today, because I think, I've been working on bringing 5G into DoD for about 3 years now. I think we've learned a lot over that 3 years. We've gone from experiments that were very useful, and not only just from testing out use cases, but just understanding how to deploy. And the other piece that I think is starting to come together is understanding the sets of partnerships. This is not a single company. It's not a single government agency game. We need to bring the right people to the table so that when we go to do a deployment, number one, we know what spectrum we're going to use, and then we can get that spectrum allocated at the base. We can manage it. If it's CBRS, we know how to manage it properly. If it's DoD spectrum, we know how to get it allocated properly. If it's MNO spectrum, we know the architectures and business models to bring the MNOs to the table. And we have the right partnerships in place, not just the OEMs coming in, but it's the integrators that know how to work on base and get these things deployed. And what I've seen in the last 3 years that we kind of gone from, we're not sure how this is going to work, where we're seeing specific examples where we can come together with the right parties and focus on the use case, which is what Juan cares about. Show me what we're going to do with it, and not worry so much about, do we have the pieces of the puzzle to make it work? I think we know how to make it work now. And so we can go off and start tackling those use cases. And we're excited in the next few years here to really transition from learning to doing and enabling the use cases and really helping the DoD in their mission.
That's perfect ending note, Steve. Thank you so much. Mark, anything else to wrap before we close it with Sonia?
I can't say anything better than these guys did, so I'm all set on my end.
Very good. Sonia.
All right, thank you, Scott. All right, well, I'd like to thank all of our participants for joining today, as well as our speakers for presenting and answering all of our questions.
Thanks for listening, and thank you to our guests, Juan Ramirez, Steve Vogelsang, David Simpson, Mark Demers, and Scott Raban. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Caracast, and be sure to listen to our other discussions. If you'd like more information on how Carahsoft can assist your organization, please visit www.carahsoft.com or email us at 5g@carahsoft.com. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day.